My guest is Dr. Nii Moi Thompson. The first time I met Dr. Nii Moi Thompson, actually, the first time I heard of him, he had written an article in the Daily Graphic. And he was described as an Africanomist. You've come a long way.
I'll tell you.
Now you're there. No, I think this is almost 20-something years ago.
Yes.
This was probably the early 2000s. And then you were writing these thought-provoking articles about the economy.
Right.
What I liked was that it was easy to understand.
Yes. Yeah.
Because, economics can be very esoteric in the way, as an investor at the time.
Yes.
And I think you continued that way.
Yeah.
And
I did that because I had a journalism background. I was a journalist before.
It's always the best.
I tell you.
It's
And then I
always the
realized
best.
that the two are actually quite related because they both require discipline.
Yeah.
They require investigation. They require accuracy. They require your ability to communicate the message. Don't write just for the fun of writing.
Yeah.
So they're like first cousins.
Because I always get frustrated when I read economists who sound so like
You write to impress yourself and your
Yeah.
colleagues. No.
You've kept that.
Yeah,
So are you
thank
still an Africanomist?
Yes, very much so. Very much. An Africanomist, a Garveyist, an Nkrumahist, Pan-Africanist, all the ists fall within that category.
So you're a
but-
Garveyist, you're an Nkrumahist.
Yes.
I see.
But Garveyist is like the umbrella term for all of it.
Because Marcus Garvey, you can say, was the lead thinker
Big time.
in that.
Big time. He inspired him. He even inspired Nkrumah.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you read Nkrumah's biography, he said of all the books that he read, none did so much to fire his imagination than the philosophy and opinions of Marcus Garvey.
Because I think he explained the black man's economic
Exactly,
situation in a way that was so clear.
Yes, yes.
A lot of the others, social justice and things,
Yeah,
but Garvey
intellect-
essentially said it's also economic issues.
You can call it applied activism as
Yeah,
opposed to the
yeah.
intellectual activism
Yeah,
of the time,
yeah.
which was mostly Pan-Africanist.
Yes, yes.
And you can understand that. Pan-Africanism started more as an intellectual thing.
Yeah.
And Garvey came in and said, no, we have to take it a step further. Let's go to Africa and actually build
Yeah.
something,
Yeah.
in his words, to stun the world, to
Yeah.
prove that what others have done, we can do. And in fact, that's my favorite phrase of Marcus Garvey, what others have done, we can. So if you receive an email from me, you see at the bottom, I have it there, what others have done, we can do. You walk into my house, the first thing you see up on the wall, what others have done, we can do.
Do you think our leaders should be going back to Garvey now? And
Definitely.
Because we are in interesting times. US is becoming basically US,
Isolationist,
America first.
yeah.
Europe doesn't know what to do. So it looks like the world is in a very difficult situation. And the African Union does not seem to matter within the global sphere of things that much. Is this the best time to say, let's go back to what Garvey said, let's build from within, just talk to me a bit about that.
I've always felt that way. Even when I was a student in America in the 80s and 90s, when I was really practicing my Garveyism, including reading a history book a month. That's a requirement for Garvey. I actually came down and donated some books to this University of Ghana. Is a School of African Studies or Center for African Studies. It was 9-volume work of Marcus Garvey.
Wow.
With the expectation that it would be taught to liberate us. I think at the basic education level, we need to introduce that because it's so inspiring. And what Nkrumah said that Marcus Garvey's book inspired him more than any other book did was not an exaggeration. I read it. I have a copy of it.
Yeah.
The Philosophy and Opinions of Marcus Garvey. And it is impossible for you to read that book and remain the same without being inspired. I mean, you have to go out there. I mean, I could stay out there for as long as I want another, but I'm here largely because of the inspiration of Marcus Garvey, that what others have done.
Do you think we treasure economic history that well? I say
No,
this
we
because
don't.
even in the discussions around the economy, a lot of times it's more about, we are an IMF program, let's do this, let's do that, let's stabilize. But I feel like there's a lot of history that needs to guide
You couldn't be so
decisions in the economy that we really don't think about.
couldn't be more right. And I've been having that discussion with the staff since I returned, that we cannot play down the relevance of history. I mean, the development is history.
Yeah.
In the
Yeah,
40-year, oh yes,
Yeah,
and in the
yeah.
40-year National Development Plan,
yeah.
there's a whole section that we devoted to Ghana's history. I remember initially we went the typical route when the Portuguese came. We said no. Before the Portuguese, we were here.
Yep.
What were the states? Where were their relationships and so forth and so on? So if you read the 40-year National Development Plan, there's a whole section that goes all the way back and then traces it back to colonial period,
Yeah.
even education. These days there have been all sorts of issues about public education. But
Yeah.
if you go through the 40-year National Development Plan, there's a section that looks at the evolution of modern education in Gold Coast, Ghana,
Yeah.
missionaries, the government,
Yeah.
and the evolution of Islamic education, and how all those things came together to form the basis of the education framework we have. That knowledge is critical. It's a critical reference point for making contemporary decisions.
Yeah.
So when we started, we didn't want to go GDP and this and that. No,
Yeah.
no. There's for
Yeah.
every GDP figure you see, there's a history behind that. How did
Yeah.
we get here?
Yeah.
And I was telling them about some of the experiences. In fact, I used the term Wagbajeke. Wagbajeke from Nadbru sound.
Yeah.
It's an interesting word because it means two things at the same time. Wagbajeke means
We've come from
yeah,
far. Where we are going is far.
Exactly.
I like you're right.
Exactly.
It's very powerful.
It's a powerful word.
Yeah.
We've come from far.
We still have a long way to
still have
go.
a long way to go.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you need to situate your economic development strategies
Yeah.
within a historical context. Without that, you
Yeah.
are simply flawed, and you are likely to even repeat the
Yeah.
errors of the past,
Yeah.
and also deprive yourself of the inspiration and lessons of the past.
Maybe my summary for this segment would be, as a journalist, we need to also find more economic historians and put them in the discourse, because what we tend to do with our news is immediacy.
Yes.
Where's the currency? What's the plan? Budget is coming. So a lot of times we are discussing the now. But it will be interesting to tell people, so what does this mean in the context of our past 70 years or 68 years? Because even, for example, this week, what Trump is doing with Ukraine and all that's going on, you can look at 1945 and what that means for the current global order. Because we know that it was 45 that the Bretton Woods institution essentially started, International Bank for Reconstruction and Development, and all these things.
Yeah.
So this is 80 years since that happened, and now US is basically going on its own. I think many times, because we don't appreciate history, we over-exaggerate our problems or over-exaggerate our successes without knowing that
The context.
there's always this. So it's an interesting one. So maybe you should find me a couple of economic historians to be interviewing.
No problem.
Because I don't even know if there's economic history as a PhD in Ghana. I don't know. I don't know. I don't know if there is.
I know of a few textbooks, but I was saying you the section of the 40-year National Development Plan that reviews our economic and political history as the basis for moving us forward. It's fascinating. It's very detailed, and it gives us a lot of inspiration. Also, for example, a lot of young people today would be shocked to know that only 40 years ago you couldn't just go out there and buy bread. You needed to register, and I showed them. Yes, I wish I had. I have
this
here
is
during the break.
1983,
82.
You needed a cheat.
Yeah, there's a booklet, a yellow booklet. I actually took my father's booklet to the office to show it to them. You needed I would look for it during the break and read it to you. It's
to buy bread.
To buy bread, not just bread. To buy bread, to buy matches, to buy soap, basic things like that. You needed to register. And the book it's called the People's Shop Booklet. And then so I get angry when people try to play down the role of history in development planning. And so you see, I'll get it. Let's wait for the break. I'll get it.
Wow.
And then you see that he bought bread, and then after 3 days later, he's given another loaf of bread, and then he's given milk, and then 1/4 soap. That means it was key soap, and they had to cut them. That's how far we've come. Wogbejeke indeed. That's how far we've come.
Next point I wanted to make, and this is not a criticism of the National Economic Dialogue, but as I sat through the sessions and listened to the recommendations, I feel like there were 6 thematic areas. I can say only one focused on the behavioral soft aspect of development. So macroeconomy is very hard. Private sector is very hard. Structural reform is very hard. Infrastructure is very hard. Growth with depth, very hard. Then there was good governance, anti-corruption, which for me is like the soft issue.
Exactly, that will handle the soft.
Do you think that our economics has missed the trick, where we spend a lot of time talking about the visible things, but the real problems are the invisible things, the way people think, the way they behave.
The soft issues, yeah.
You know, and I feel like we don't have a lot of airtime for that. We don't even discuss those.
Yes.
But they're actually probably the real barriers. So, for example, if a company tells you and the ease of doing business in Ghana, ease of doing business is not just a regulatory issue. It's also the way the people work.
Yes.
You get it? So you can say government can change the law can say register your business in 2 days. You can do digitalization. But if the people are lazy, they are lazy. Do you get it?
Yeah.
But I don't think we spend a lot of time talking about behavior.
Yes.
And we feel like, and I think that's more a bigger impediment to development than we think.
It was mentioned, or at least treated, and certainly I emphasize that on behalf of the Commission, but it will take a separate effort to unpack that. Okay. Remember at the meeting or the dialogue, I said that we, from the Commission's point of view, we are going to humanize development by rethinking economic growth. Because currently, we think of economic growth only on one dimension, GDP, which you could easily attain by, let's say, replacing every worker in Ghana with a robot. And GDP may grow by 20%.
Or digging 10 new oil wells.
Exactly. And it
with
wouldn't
machines.
really translate into. So our new definition, we're going to support that with the whole research program, is that GDP must grow, but so must jobs and wages. So growth in output, growth in jobs, growth in wages. These three must happen for us to be able to determine output, jobs, and wages. Now, the only way this can happen is through productivity growth. And productivity runs through all three. It's only through productivity that you can increase output in a sustainable and cost-effective manner. It's only through productivity that you can also create employment, because once you use the same resources to produce more, your unit cost goes down, you are able to sell more, and therefore there's a demand for labor. So you can create more jobs, especially when you look at the outside or the external part. And then wages. We need a way to make sure that wages keep pace with productivity. There's currently a disparity, and there's a reason for that, because productivity itself is relatively low. But in the process of improving productivity, that's where the work ethic comes in, the ethos come in. And that is also a function of industrial organization, how you organize the systems. If the systems are so lax that people will show up and not do anything, they would show up and not do anything. For instance, my office, when I showed up, there was a television set on the wall. I said, no, we are not paid to come here and watch television, so get rid of it. And you're going to get rid of it in all the offices.
Watch the news.
You're not there to watch the news. Sometimes they say, oh, in case something happens, I say nothing will happen. If something happens, we'll all get outside and we'll be okay. So it's a
so you shut it down.
Oh no, I've told them. I see that it's still hanging there, so someone's going to pay a price for that. But in fact, for me, the presence of television sets in government offices is the ultimate symbol of a country that's simply not serious. I've been to places where I walk through reception straight to the minister's office, and no one asked me a question because everyone was watching television.
They're watching a soap opera.
Say that again.
They're watching a soap opera.
No, you are not joking.
At 11 a.m.
Quite literally,
Yes.
and it wasn't just soap opera, but soft porn with these telenovelas and all that. People were half naked. 10 a.m. in government offices, and you could walk through a reception, and nobody asked. And then they wonder why their salaries are low. Because productivity is low. I applied, I was outside. I came here June last year to apply for renewal of my driver's license because I was using it there. I thought, given all the hype about digitization and so forth and so on, I come to Ghana, I pay the premium, and I pay the premium for renewal. I'll get it in like a week. They said, oh, no, Mr. Thompson, it's like that.
You went to the premium center?
Yes.
And you didn't get it immediately?
No. They said it was going to take a couple of months.
Are you serious?
Yes.
Is it because it's international?
No, it was my Ghanaian driver's license, not an international.
No international driver's license.
No. I was in South Africa with
Really?
so I could actually be allowed to use my Ghanaian driver's license. They said it would take a couple of months, so I left all the information behind. 6 months later, when I came back to Ghana in December to vote, the driver's license was still not ready, and they could tell you with such pride, the June cards are not ready.
Just like that?
Yeah, with some satisfaction.
The June cards are not ready.
The June cards are not ready. So I'm standing there, I was like, what the hell is going on? 6 months? Meanwhile, they do that in 7 days in other places, 6 months. So I used some Takashibi, and then I went to see the director, and I think in a day or two, I got my card. So 6 months. Only last week, I finally received a text message that my driver's license is ready. So 8 months to do something that other people do in 7 days.
What is the cost of such a thing? Is it the lack of proper organization
Yes.
of the workspace?
Yes.
Is it the public
Systems.
sector culture?
Systems.
Is it the way that
reforms.
people are raised at home? Is it the school they go to? What leads
It's
to all of that?
It's all of that. There's a cultural element, but there's also an organizational element. Again, as I said, it all depends on how you set it up. If you set it up and you enforce it, it will work. And that's what, in a sense, I've started doing in my office. Besides getting rid of television, I told them, listen, when I'm not in the office, turn off the lights. We save money that way.
But would that be enough for you at NDPC? Do you not think that... I'm pushing this because...
Please do.
We've done
Please
a
do.
big economic summit, which is great. We've discussed what we need to do to fix our
Sure.
problems. Do you not think that somebody like the president should champion some behavioral change around work culture? Or some champion like the Minister for Labor?
Yes.
Because what you're saying, if you ask most employees, they'll tell you that that's our biggest problem. People are on Facebook during work.
Yes.
They are not... Like somebody comes to the reception and the person like a nuisance.
Yes, exactly.
They are not really interested. Some are eating fufu.
You are not exaggerating.
So how do you, like, this is something that I feel like should be number one.
It's part of our tender. I told you at the program that because we are rethinking growth as a three-dimensional phenomenon instead of the one-dimensional phenomenon, we are also supporting that with the 10-point research agenda. It's going to spread over 10 years. The commission is not fully established yet. So once it's done, and productivity research is going to be one of those which will use the findings to drive the kind of public sector reforms that will bring these changes. Work ethic. For instance, nobody who is involved in frontline service delivery in government should be allowed to be on the phone at the front desk. You can be on the phone in the back or whatever, but the front desk, it just shouldn't
Or social
happen.
meia. It should even be blocked.
In fact, you should turn it off.
Yeah.
And you go to the American embassy, you see them on the... No, as soon as they check in, there's a place there where you put your phone. There's a number that you can be reached at in case of emergency, maybe your kids want. But during work hours, there's zero tolerance for doing anything other than that for which you are paid. Now, fortunately, in our current context, the president has also appointed a minister for public sector reforms. We are going to work. I just got her number yesterday, and I'm going to reach out to her.
Yeah.
But it will require some sort of diagnostics for us to see how can we spend so much money. By my own reckoning, over the past 40 years, we might have received something close to $1 billion in donor assistance in all forms, some of them 200 million, some 300 million for public sector reforms. And yet the impact appears to have been zero. Yesterday during the program, I told you about my experience in trying to clear a speaker at customs. And I was nodding when you said when people are eating and so forth. I experienced all that. You go into an office, there are 10 people in there, only 2 are actually working. A couple of them are just pacing up and down, distracting the 2 who are working. The others are having a feast. They're not just eating, they're having a feast there. So in the end, a simple speaker
Can be eating a benkwai in the office.
in the office, it's a feast. It's a whole feast in the presence of visitors. They couldn't care less because they are allowed to do that. The system permits that. So a speaker that in other places take, and I gave the example, in SA, it would have taken me no more than 15 minutes.
To clear that same thing.
With zero paperwork, everything was digitized. In Ghana, it took me nearly 2 weeks with 28 pages of useless paperwork. 28 pages. And the 28 pages
Sorry, how far back is this? This is last year?
This is just a couple of weeks ago.
Oh, no.
No, this year.
To
This year.
clear something you
This
need
year.
to... Wow.
Let's see, I arrived in Ghana, was it 24th January. And I couldn't bring the speaker with me because of the magnet in there. They said it would interfere with the communication. So it was a Saturday, and then the speaker arrived on Tuesday. That's when I received the call, and the lady, I think she was ordering food in the background.
Whilst giving you official information.
Giving me official information.
Oh my God.
In the background. You can, I mean, we are sitting, Bernard, we...
No, on Ben Katinga.
Oh, man.
We are simply not serious. So when I hear people go on and on and on about the private sector being the private sector without an efficient and progressive public sector can simply not function. Now, I mentioned the American Embassy. If you were there before they went online with their forms, you would have noticed at the bottom, they always had that footnote that everything they were doing is in compliance with the Paper Reduction Act of 1982. Yes. There was a federal law that reduced the amount of paperwork involved in dealing with the federal government, including American embassies abroad.
In 1982.
1980, and then when Bill Clinton came into office in the 1990s, he appointed his vice president, Al Gore, to even reinforce that. I was a student then, and I remember Al Gore coming on television with a forklift.
Wow.
Filled with papers that had been removed in dealing with its federal government. Meanwhile, we are like, it's like, sometimes I think it's like noon out there while others are doing something. And for us, it's like 2 a.m. We are just wrapping ourselves in our blanket. It's as if we don't know what is going on in the rest of the world.
To end this segment, what I want to ask you is, give me 2 or 3 sources of change for this type of thing, which is really the behavioral thing.
Yes.
Are you looking more in the home? Is it the school? Is it the church? Is it the government? Is it the media?
Yes.
Who should take it upon themselves to say, we need to do better. We need to be more serious. We need to be more clinical. We need to be more results oriented, because the lackadaisical nature, this thing you're describing in the public sector, it's even in the private sector too,
Yes.
if there's no supervision.
Exactly.
So you go to some shops and then you enter, nobody minds you. Unless the owner of the shop is there, sometimes they are so rude.
Yes.
So it's not necessarily even a public sector thing. It's more like a Ghanaian.
It's a cultural thing. It's a cultural, and believe it or not, we travel with it also.
Wow.
In the 1980s, when I lived in New York City, there weren't too many Ghanaian shops there. I lived in Brooklyn, but there were Ghanaian shops in the Bronx. When you went to the Ghanaian shops, guess what they were doing? They were busy watching Osofo Dazi.
Even in the
In New York City, in Brooklyn, they wouldn't pay attention to it. They were busy watching Osofo Dazi. And I once went to a Chinese shop.
so they've taken this thing
They've
there.
taken it with them. But I once went to a Chinese shop because I went there because they had African and Caribbean foods or something. And I wanted Gary, and he said he had no Gary. But he was determined
To get you the Gary?
Yes. So I wrote it down for him on a piece of paper. He said, okay, Gary, okay, come next week. He went to the Bronx.
Chinese.
Yes, he went to the Bronx, got the Gary,
And brought
and
it.
he brought it to Brooklyn. Customer
Wow.
service. We
Wow.
have zero sense of customer service in this. And someone just pulled out, it's very interesting. It's on Twitter.
Wow.
I wrote an article about 10, 14 years ago. Someone just pulled it up. And I was complaining that in every shop you go to in Ghana, you ask for something, it is finished. You asked it is finished. So I said, where were you when the thing was finishing? When you had 10 pieces, it came down to 8, to 4, to 1. Where were you? And then they just stare at you. So it's something, they all fall under productivity improvements, because productivity is also a way of life if you structure it well. So I'm very happy because the commission is not an implementing agency. The best we can do is to support government with research and research findings, in addition to planning and monitoring. So as I said, that's actually going to be my passion. We are going to, it's a 10-point research program. We will use that to enforce. But first, we need to understand what happened to all the public sector interventions. One of them was called NERP, National Institutional Renewal Program. I remember it was a big thing funded by the World Bank. And we end up with 28 pages just to clear a little speaker. So you can imagine the hell the businesses are going through. There are businesses in South Africa, Ghanaian businesses, that choose to import plantain from Latin America instead of Ghana, because it's cheaper and less of a hassle. Plantain. I just assumed that it would come from Ghana. I just said, no, too much trouble with Ghana. So they import from Latin America, plantain. So yes, we have a big, and as I said, fortunately, we now have a minister. And the commission is going to work very closely with the minister. We first need to do the diagnostics. Why have previous interventions failed? We have a rough idea of, because you hear people complain all the time. As for plans, we have plenty plans. It's the implementation that is the problem. Well, it's a problem partly because if you go through the plans, there's virtually no risk analysis, because you need 3 hours: risks, responses, and responsibilities. There's zero analysis for that. And I remember there was a time when the Ghana Urban Strategy was reviewed at a forum, and there was another responsibility column. They have various MDAs. And every time they call them, they say, well, we didn't even know that we have this responsibility. So it can be solved. We are not the only ones to have ever faced this problem. We can easily go back and dig through it. So hopefully once we launch the program and we begin to work with the ministries, Of course, Honorable Rashid Purple was also there. I spoke with him.
He actually agreed with a suggestion by the private sector. No, private sector group said,
right,
instead of just focusing on fair wages all the time, we should think of productive labor.
Exactly.
And the minister sort of on paper agreed.
Labor productivity.
Yes.
Labor productivity.
We'll take a short break. My guest is Dr. Nii Moi Thompson. Is the board chair or chairman of the National Development Planning Commission. He used to be the Director General of the NDPC. He also advised President Mahama as his economic advisor in the previous administration. He was a member of the 8-member National Economic Dialogue Committee, and he also was part of the panel that decided to basically take the recommendations of the 6 thematic areas and work with. He has the monitoring role for government policy. We'll come back and delve with a few things. We are mixing history with reality of the current, now, and the future, talking about independence and what it means, which of the ideas of our forebears are still relevant today, and what the imperative should be for our reflection on a very important day like this. We're happy to take your comments as well. 054-998-6996. Stay with us. Later on, my guest will be Chief Momin, my very good friend, who's another, I call him an activist, artist.
But he's also a thinker.
Absolutely.
Yeah, those people,
absolutely.
Yeah.
So he'll join me.
Deep thinker.
We'll talk about the 68-year journey of Ghana. He has some very interesting ideas about the orange economy. He wrote an article where he said, in addition to everything that was discussed at the forum, there's the orange economy part, music, the arts, theater, tourism, that he believes can unlock not just jobs, foreign exchange, but also goodwill. Very interesting article he wrote.
BTS in South Korea, they bring in a couple of billion.
Yeah, so he would talk to me about that after your interview. But I know you know what he's saying.
Yeah, definitely.
Because I still think Ghana has a lot of brand in, even, I mean, the point you made about the plantain from Caribbean notwithstanding, most people of African descent, they regard Ghana highly. From a very soft perspective, they like the country.
Yes.
They like our history.
Yes.
They like our first president.
Yes.
And they like what we represent. Yes. So that if we create the right environment,
it'll be unbelievable.
I mean, I read an article last week which was so sad that a lot of the African Americans who had bought lands here were having to now grapple with land litigation. Yes. And I was like, why do we do this? Because these guys, there's a lot of black money that wants to come into Ghana. And that's an important part of the development because, again, historically, the Chinese, the Indians, they've used their diasporas to develop their economies. Okay, there's a strong congressional black lobby for Africa. AGOA came out of that. Yes. So I feel like Ghana can take the lead in attracting that type of money if we will do a few things right. I just want a quick comment on that before I...
No, you're absolutely right. There's a great deal of goodwill. Despite all our challenges, including those that I've listed, there's a great deal of goodwill out there for Ghana.
Yeah.
Again, when you go out there and you say Ghana, depending on the age of the person, the first, Kwame Nkrumah. Kwame, that almost always come out. When I was a little kid, 17, when I showed up in Freetown looking for a place to sleep, I approached a tailor. The first thing, when I told him I was from Ghana, Kwame Nkrumah, he gave us a loan. He was from Guinea. He was he was a Guinean tailor. His name was Bailoba. I still remember him very well. So that goodwill is there. When Liberia's civil war ended, we sent engineers from VRA to go and help them restore power. When Ebola broke out,
I think there were more Liberians in Ghana than any other country in terms of countries that received refugees.
Oh, okay.
I think we received more Liberian refugees than any other country.
Than any other, yes,
we did.
And we have a history, Ghanaian history in Liberia that dates back centuries. You have, in Liberia, some of the prominent families are the Addis, A-D-D-Y. They are from Ghana.
Okay.
Akoleache family is very prominent there.
Okay.
The Dapos from Pram. They are also there. They are all Liberians now. But roots in Ghana. The Banamans, the Case.
Okay.
They are all Liberians with Ghanaian roots. So it was fairly easy for some of them to trace. I'm actually related to a couple of them. And they came down here. So there's that. So the goodwill is there. If we can only put our house in order, it will even be bigger than what it is now. Because from my experience in South Africa, I concluded, for instance, that there's probably more Black Americans going there for tourism than they are coming here. partly because the tourism sector is highly developed
and
there's
it's
a
easier.
lot more to offer,
Yes.
and it goes beyond slavery tourism. Because yes, slavery is okay to remember and all that, but people also want to have fun afterwards.
But you can even add that.
Yes, but the services are not there. After you visited the place, the restaurants.
But
are
this
not
is
there.
what we're trying to do with the Heritage Caravan. So we are mixing.
Yes, you are doing fantastic.
Mixing the
exactly
the cultural, historical
with having fun.
Yes,
with
that's what we're
having
trying to do.
It's very critical. It's very
so
critical.
maybe we can discuss that later. How,
Okay.
as a low-hanging fruit, you can basically develop the tourism infrastructure. Because when people bring in foreign exchange, it stays here.
Yes.
And tourism employs people.
A lot of people.
So,
unfortunately, it's one of the lowest. I don't know, I'm not sure you were there when the productivity report was launched last week. But the tourism sector was at the bottom, which shocked me.
Of productivity.
Productivity and job creation.
Why? Where is that report? I need to see it.
You can get it. I have a copy. I can send you the soft copy, but it's launched by the Ghana Statistical Service.
Productivity report?
Yes.
How did I miss this?
Yes. It's the first of its kind, so don't feel too bad. But at the upper end, the most productive industry in Ghana is the mining sector.
Are you kidding me?
Yes. Even though it shows in other statistics, it counts for around 11-12% of GDP, but it contributes about 30% for GDP growth.
Oh my God, I actually have it.
But the downside...
Productivity, employment, and growth.
Exactly.
Oh my God,
Exactly.
I didn't read it.
And then the second, if you go through it, the second most productive is what they call corporate agriculture. And then everything else is... And that's a reason
So the most productive sector is the mining sector.
With negative employment growth, followed by the corporate agriculture sector with positive employment growth. Now, the question...
Can you explain that?
Yes. In other words, over the period that they looked at, as the mining sector became productive, it shed jobs, which is not surprising because part of mining sector productivity is the result of mechanization.
I get it.
And mechanization is said to have social benefits. Even though you lose jobs, it also reduces accidents and fatalities.
Correct.
So it's a
balancing act.
Exactly. But at the base of it is one, access to global capital, two, access to global best practices. They use industrial engineers while most places, in fact, when I talk to my engineer friends, I was surprised to find out that they said we don't have industrial engineers in Ghana. Maybe they have them in one or two places, but the universities don't even offer degrees in industrial engineering. So, but these firms have them. They have access to them at the international level. And when you go to South Africa, for instance, industrial engineers are all over the place. And that in part explains South Africa's, the depth of its industrial economy, despite all the challenges, because they come into an industrial sector and they optimize the processes. So one of them that I dealt with, and I keep telling that story because it was so powerful, they come into a place and they look at the time between tasks and say, how do we reduce that time?
Doc, let me push you. Is there not a trade-off between high productivity and high employment? And give me 2 seconds to explain this. So you already give an example of the mining sector. But even in agriculture, I've noticed that globally, countries that are more productive per hectare or per acre tend to have fewer human beings in the sector. So that the more mechanized agri becomes, the more productive it is. Now, you've also said you want us to look at the 3D development. Output, employment, and income. Now, we may run into challenges because if you want to be more productive, you may be less human-centered in your employment. So even though society benefits in savings and we can produce more and make it cheaper, people may not have work to do.
That is one biased view, if for lack of a better term. And it depends, because even the language of productivity must be coined properly. One way of, and that's not, what I'm going to say is not my favorite approach. They're doing more with less. It means, and the labor unions in particular are very sensitive about that, especially in places like South Africa where the labor unions are very active. Because for them, doing more with less means laying off workers. So they oppose it. It took a while for them to get around to the idea that we can do more with the same number of people. And if you do well, in other words, you give them the necessary skills for them to produce more for the same amount of effort. And the more you produce over time, the lower your unit cost, and therefore the more competitive the firm becomes. That means all things being equal, you can even pay them more and also get a bigger market. Now, the example I was telling you about earlier where the industrial engineer came in to optimize the processes, it was 110 seconds between tasks. And he reduced that, he reorganized it. It's amazing when you see them at work, including...
So it's still people working?
People working, but
they are
just
more efficient.
improving. And believe it or not, reduced it from 110 seconds to 24 seconds. And it saved the company over $200,000 a year. Now that reduces your cost of doing business. Obviously, once that goes down, profitability goes up, the capacity to pay more goes up, government, of course, revenue goes on. And so there's a feedback loop. Now, in terms of jobs, again, it depends on how you structure your economy. The U.S. is perhaps the most productive economy today, but unemployment rate is always low. It's been low compared to the others, precisely because it's highly efficient. There are only 335 people in the U.S., or 335 million people in the U.S., versus 350 million people in the 20 Euro countries. And yet the US's GDP is almost double.
So your point is the way we arrange work
Exactly.
is more important than simply getting rid of people. So when we say we want to be more productive, we are not saying sack people.
Yes.
We are saying let's reorganize
Optimize,
work so
exactly.
people can do more.
Precisely.
Okay.
Because they are sitting there watching television. All right?
Let's
You
push
can
this.
get
Let's
them
push
to
this
work.
further.
But let me share the thing with you.
No,
As I
I'll
said.
come back to it.
Oh, okay.
Let's push this
okay.
further since you're on a roll.
Okay, no problem.
You made a point at the end, the program that I want you to elaborate on. So, generally, it's been wrongly said that the SMEs represent 70% of the GDP. The right figure is about 34%.
30%. Right.
But they represent about more than 70% of employment.
Yes.
Good. So you can say that SME sector is low. It has low productivity. Just generally.
Yes. Generally, not just in Ghana. In fact, it's global.
Globally, yes.
Yeah, globally. Yeah.
So my question to you is, how do we make SMEs more productive? Because it seems to me as if every time we talk about SMEs and formalization, we are thinking about getting taxes from them. But I think the conversation will be more around how do we make SMEs more productive?
Bernard, you just answered the question, so
no,
maybe I should get out of the chair and go home.
Elaborate
but
it,
you did it so well. You did it so well because every time we talk about the informal sector, the first thing is taxes. Yeah, there's a segment there that should be paying taxes that are not paying taxes. Yeah. But the vast majority, overwhelming majority of them are below the threshold for even paying taxes, precisely because skills are low, capital per worker, as we call it, is low. Production processes are so all those things combined means that the value added per worker there is very low. And that's what actually brings down the overall average productivity for Ghana, which is around $5 or $6 per hour worked. Now, there's a global ranking for that, and I'm citing that figure for Ghana because it's related. They use the US as a benchmark, and for the US it's $70 an hour versus Ghana where it is around $5 or $6 an hour. And the minimum wage in the US, the federal minimum wage is around $7. Some states pay $10, $15, even $25 and so forth and so on. But you are looking at a situation in Ghana where the minimum wage is even on a daily basis, not even an hourly basis. So we have just around $1. They just increased it recently. If you break it down, it comes down to around 15 cents per hour. While your counterpart in the US is doing $7 an hour, $10 an hour, $15 an hour. And part of the reason it is so low for Ghana is because of the dominance of the informal sector. So formalization should actually be an explicit objective of policy for any transformation agenda. But unfortunately, as you rightly said, we often think of it only in tax terms. If you work with them to improve productivity and incomes go up, right away the tax base also expands. And then if you look at the skills profile, that's the scary part. When the last time I was reading GLAD 7, Ghana Living Standard Survey, the 7th edition, where 20% of our labor force have no employment, education, 20%. And another 54% have up to JHS education. So we're looking at 3/4 of a labor force that for all intents and purposes is not suitable for a modern economy. And I mentioned this to Professor Jimebwedi the other day, and he gave some examples that this is true. He said, for instance, he noticed that some Uber drivers cannot even read maps. Yes. And this is not to put them down because in a sense they're actually victims of a failed system. Yeah. But we are living in a digital age and we cannot read maps. I was
And
told
imagine what he could have done if he could have read maps. He'd be more
Precisely.
he would have probably had double the number of customers.
Exactly.
But because he can't read maps, he'll be making phone calls, he will lose customers and blame the network.
Exactly.
You get it?
It happens. The knock-on effects are all of it. So eventually, what my conclusion, based on my experience, I was in South Africa for 3 years working on this productivity thing.
Yeah.
That productivity is the key to everything. Because once you do that, and it's funny because I also worked on the strategy document for the 24-hour economy, even while I was there, with President Mohammed. Even though he was campaigning, he was providing feedback and all that. But something he said, just 4 words he said, that go to the heart of the development and productivity challenge. He said, Ghana must work efficiently. And that is the conversational definition of productivity. Ghana must work efficiently, whether it's ECG, whether it's our roads. Our roads are some of the worst in terms of services that we get. And sometimes I wonder, what the hell is going on? Where are the police? You see a police officer directing traffic, and then suddenly he sees somebody whose insurance or roadworthy thing has expired, and then he stops directing traffic and then jumps to. So we need to be focused. In the morning, the police officer's sole objective is free traffic flow. Every second that you spend in traffic that you shouldn't spend is a cost. And if we were to do the right research, you see that that alone is costing us billions and billions
Let me
of
ask you,
dollars.
how do you work with the labor unions and the professional bodies and the informal sector groups
Yes.
to improve the skills of the average worker?
Yes.
Because you've convinced me here that if you give somebody better skills, he'll be more productive. And if he's more productive, he'll make more money. And you've also said that a lot of the time we looked at this productivity thing from, let's cut jobs. Let's cut jobs. That's not what we want to do. So you have labor unions. So you have Association of Plumbers, Association of Mechanics, and all of these people. How do you, because if you, so are we going to do on the job training? Are we going to do a special intervention? Because if we give them, and some of it is behavioral training as well, if we did that in a concerted fashion, they'll be more productive. And the economy will do better.
Yes.
So how do we go about
The thing
this?
is that you and I tend to think on the same wavelength often, because you mentioned some of these things.
Yeah.
Institutionally, when the productivity report was launched, the representative for MDPI, Management Development Productivity Institute, was there. We were already contemplating reaching out to them, MDPI and GEA, Ghana Enterprise Development Agency, for skills development and other types of, so for entrepreneurs, for example. And it's funny because only last week there was a team, forget where, trying to remember them. They came to see me. They were into skills development. It's an international organization. They were into skills development, and I welcome them. I said, fine, it actually fits within our proposed research agenda. But I want to remind you guys to also emphasize soft skills, not just hard skills. How to drive or nail it, that's the hard skill. But is the person trustworthy? Are they reliable?
Customer
Do
service.
they pay attention to detail? Do they pay attention to excellence? I've had so many problems in the construction sector.
my God.
Where as a painter, I asked to paint a wall, and he actually painted over the keyhole.
Bro, I have somebody who was doing a net door for me. When he finished, I had to put tissue because mosquitoes were entering the room through the kitchen because he did the net door, and the net door there was a
It's all about standards. It's all about standards. But we have to work with them. And the experience of the previous experiences, I worked on projects where we used something called SBA, Small Business Associations, and through them we transmitted best practices to their members. I've always had, I don't know why, but I've always had a soft spot for the Ghana Garages Association. I've seen what's been done in other countries, and I think we can work with them for them to improve their productivity. Because if you improve productivity, you can actually charge a lot more than you are now.
Yes.
And the customer will willingly pay. Rather than you
cutting corners.
Exactly.
It's like Tobo is all they think about. You know?
So hard skills, yes, but we also
skills.
need to focus on soft skills, even and not just for informal sector. Those I was thinking the other day, for instance, a degree in accounting, shouldn't we add soft skills to it? Excellence, attention to detail, honesty. Besides how to balance books and all that.
You know, the assumption is that when you go through a good professional course, the assumption is that you assimilate that in the way the lectures are delivered, the assignments and the homework. But as you said,
it has to be explicit.
It has because because people can cut corners.
Yes.
So somebody can get A,
Yes.
and still not assuming the skill because either he's just naturally brilliant
Yes.
or he can get someone to do the work
Yeah,
for
yeah.
him.
It has to
So
be
we have to
expensive.
deliberately
You have to, yeah.
make it examinable even.
Exactly.
You
In
know?
fact, since the last financial crisis, 2008, 2009, they're
Yeah.
not teaching ethics in business schools.
Very
It never used to
explicitly.
be that. Yeah, yeah.
Yes.
It's excellent. So we need to also explicitly
Yeah.
teach these values starting from early on.
But we must also lead by example, Doc, which is another
Yes.
problem where
Yes.
my concern is that the leadership does not. A lot of times we talk down to people. We're like, okay, we need to train the people. We need to do this. But the people who are duty bearers, they also need to set a standard. So
Yes.
like you're saying, take the TV off from my room. You are going to be modest and accountable as a leader. A lot of times we downplay this. But when people look at what leadership does, it basically shapes the way they behave.
Yes, yes.
So there has to also be, so which is why I come back to government, that the ministers, the CEOs have to have a certain posture to frugality, to accountability, to thrift in a way that communicates that we are in a new season.
Exactly.
But if you finish a conference, everybody sits in a V8 and jumps and goes home.
Yes.
Everybody has the AC blasting on while they're all waiting for the conference to finish.
Yes. In fact,
How do you expect the security man, the policeman who's guarding you to be thrifty?
Yes.
Because you've just finished a conference discussing austerity. Every person sat in a Land Cruiser.
Yes.
And somebody opened the door for them, they sit down and they go home. How do you expect me to think that you are broke?
Oh, the most interesting one is conferences on poverty. And the lunch break, the food, man.
Yeah.
Someone.
So Doc, I think that some of your work as NDPC and government has to be more on the government agencies to
applied
the
research.
CEOs and the people who are duty, because we look at you guys.
Exactly.
And then when we see you, say, wow,
Yeah.
if this is how your man is behaving, within 2 weeks of becoming a minister,
Yeah.
he's already smelling different, he's looking different.
But the most dramatic experience is what the young, because we're always saying, oh, youth of today. And I say, well, the youth of today watch TV and they see MPs throwing chairs and whatnot. What do you really expect them? The youth of today are a reflection of the values of the adults
That's
who
why
raised
they
them.
are fighting in secondary schools now.
Exactly.
Because Parliament is fighting.
So you can, and Parliament can never really, given what happened, I don't think any MP can really criticize any young men and women who then go.
What's
and
the moral authority of probing
Yes.
secondary school disturbance when you yourself were carrying
You're
tables?
doing that. So you're
you know?
absolutely right. Leadership by example is very critical. But we work with all these groups, skills development. In fact, I want to push for a point where, up to a point, it has to be free. It has to be treated as a public good. Because when the productivity goes up for them and incomes go up and revenue also goes up, the government benefits. So it's not everything, but government may want to bear, let's say, 90% of the cost. Because if you make it completely free, there's also the risk of abuse. So just an element to show some level of commitment, I think we should be able to transform. And this is also critical for the 24-hour economy, because people often think of it as 3 shifts and then everything is done. No, it covers the entire spectrum. Every business, whether they are working a single shift, double shift, 3 shift, must utilize their resources efficiently. It's the only way we can really get that done.
I need to say that the statistical service has been doing a great job. I think
Yes,
the
I
past
agree.
4 years or so.
I agree.
Because even the usability
Yes.
of their research and the way they present it
Yes.
for the media to use, I need to commend.
I couldn't agree with you more. Prof. Inin has done fantastic.
I hope NDPC works with GSS.
Oh, definitely. Prof has been, I've known him for almost 20 years now from UCC.
Yeah.
And when he was looking into taking that job, we discussed it. I said, Prof, nobody is more qualified.
Is he
for
an
this.
economist or a statistician?
He's an economist.
He's amazing.
Yes, but he's introduced some refinements that most people don't know. You know, because I've worked in the States, I'm used to certain things that for a long time we didn't have. Now he's introduced them. Now we have percentage increases or percentage contributions to economic growth, which we never had before.
For specific.
No, so that one is different from percentage growth. So, for example, you have GDP growth of, let's say, 6.7%. I have that on my laptop.
Yeah.
6.7%. The question is, how much did each sector contribute
To
to
that?
that 7%?
Okay.
Not as a share of the overall economy, but that growth.
Oh.
And it's critical because when you look at the trend, the biggest contributor to that 6.7% has almost always been the mining sector. They contribute 30% of the 6.7%, and it's known as percentage points. which is different from percentage per se. Now, Prof has introduced that. So I was in South Africa. I said, Prof, you are making my life difficult because when I go to your website now, I can't leave.
That's but just a quick point on that. So, the mining sector is doing a lot.
Yes.
And inherent there is also the Galamsey question.
Yes.
Because some of the, because what I've seen is that some of the numbers that are reported officially in terms of what we exported, they don't necessarily tally with what the countries that receive our gold say they got.
We've said that, yeah.
Now, so that discrepancy may be a Galamsey discrepancy, where people are informally mining, and their gold or whatever they mine gets to another country through unorthodox means. And so, for example, the amount of gold that we export officially has to tally with the amount of gold that our top five gold importers get. So I'm just saying that this statistic about productivity in the mining sector, we have to also add it to the discussion on Galamsey to try and understand what's going on there and maybe why it's so difficult to tackle it. Because maybe, even though we are not admitting it, informal and sometimes unregulated mining plays a more critical role than we want to admit, despite its environmentally destructive tendencies. And that has to be brought into the conversation for the solution to be more effective.
Yes. I agree. This very study, I think, looked at the formal mining sector.
Okay.
And not necessarily the informal or the Galamsey sector. The Galamsey sector is obviously very complicated. There's a lot of money that flows through there, billions of dollars that are not really captured in the official statistics. So you're absolutely right. That's something we need to look at. But Galamsey is also a reflection of failed governance institutions.
Yeah.
If they're working, I don't think, how could somebody bring in a grader all the way from Korea and end up in the forest in Ghana from Tema, travel overland and end up behind somebody's house in one of the regions? It's a failure of governance institutions, the same way we feel. So I think overall public sector reforms certainly should take a look at some of these issues. Yeah. And those are the operational issues. When in the session that I sat in, I thought that we needed to break down our recommendations or discussions into various groups. Some of them are operational, some are institutional, some are policy related, some are structural. The structural problems will take a lot longer to address, but at least you need to flag them now and begin to work on them. And education is one of them.
Just a final point on this, and I encourage listeners to get the labor productivity report. I think that's what it's called, right?
Right.
The three main sectors, industry is clearly more productive than agric and services. Now, this is an important point because, there's this school of thought that Ghana must transition from agric into services because industrialization, we can never compete. But this document tells us that industry is still more productive than services, which I find interesting.
It's interesting because industry encompasses a lot of sub-industries or subsectors. So this very statistic, for instance, may be skewed by the dominance of mining, which is part of, because industry is made up of mining and quarrying, manufacturing, construction. Construction, for instance, has very low productivity and low employment.
That's surprising.
It shouldn't be, but if you look,
why is it so low?
Because of the obstacles of construction sector. Just before we came in, we were discussing the issue of land litigation and its negative impact on construction. There are so many factors that drive that. And so productivity is low and employment also is low. The same as the hospitality sector. So again, it goes to institutional reforms to free these things. I think you mentioned the amount of litigation going on for the
No, so yes, yesterday the road minister was on the Pokwasi of Fankor to Isawam Road. And we are told there are over 80 court cases basically hampering parts of the project on the Amasaman side.
So when I took over and they said they were organizing an infrastructure summit, I reviewed the concept note, and I noticed that there was nothing on land use or LUSPA, Land Use and Spatial Development Authority, broadly speaking, spatial planning. And this is something we explicitly took into consideration when we were preparing the 40-year National Development Plan. We paired infrastructure development, which we would call the Ghana Infrastructure Plan, 9 volumes of it, with the Spatial Development Framework, which was 3 volumes, but very dense, that the two should always be looked at together. You can never look at infrastructure outside of the context of spatial planning or human settlement. So the two should go together. And hopefully when the conference comes on, we will be able to...
Final point. There are people who do not see the point in 40-year plans. And I've heard some of them say things are moving too quickly. They say we are in a VUCA world. They use something uncertain, chaotic, whatever. So it's like it's a 40-year plan is not realistic because the variables are so many and too many things changing. So I want you to explain, if you say you have a 40-year plan, so let's assume from 2020 to 2060, is it to say this is what you want to do or this is just what you want to see?
Good. It's a vision. So this is what you want to see.
Okay.
And then within that are medium-term plans that then try to operationalize what you want to see. So 40-year plan is an aspirational document. Nothing is cast in stone. But at least it gives you a sense of purpose, a sense of direction, which is then translated into medium-term plan. Because yes, some people may not be around in 40 years, but at least in the medium term, there's a reasonable expectation that we would be here, all things being equal. And then from that medium-term plan, you develop your annual plans, plus the budget to finance the annual plans. And even then, given the fact that there are no guarantees in life, the annual plan itself is subjected to what? Further revisions as things change. Look at what happened with COVID. It happened in March 2020. The plans we have for the year as a whole had to be revised. So yes, there are no guarantees, but that doesn't mean that we shouldn't dream about attaining higher objectives. That's just how it's been. So personally, when I hear people say, oh no, it cannot be done, you are too ambitious and whatnot, it just, as Marcus Garvey used to say, the more you told him that it couldn't be done, the higher up he rolled his sleeves. And you could see that in Kwame Nkrumah. Kwame Nkrumah, they said independence in the short just he said no, independence now. And he did it.
Could it be because, when you study economics from the first week, they will tell you there are different kinds of economies. And then they have the planned economy or the so-called
central plan.
Yes. So they make it, they sort of caricature that against a free. So basically, I think a more realistic economy is market-led, as against a centrally planned economy, which is, and then they look at the communist societies.
Yes, so it's become.
Could that be part of the reason for the skepticism?
It's a misconception. Believe it or not, even the most liberal country in the world, the United States, has a 100. They just don't plan. They have a 100-year plan for creating jobs, 1950 to 2050. And it's broken down in 10-year increments. That's one reason, because they plan. They just don't do things.
So it's a misconception.
They confuse centralized planning of the Soviet era, which is past and gone. You have the American one that's there, but it's not there. Nobody knows it's there, but it's actually used. And so if you Google OOH, Occupational Outlook Handbook, that's where they explain everything. OOH, Occupational. It comes from their 100-year plan. And it's 10 years. And it gives you every information you need about the job market in America.
Final point on this before we move on. And listeners, thank you for your messages. We'll read them shortly. You said Garvey said what others have done we can do, which is fine. Is there an African system? Should there be one? I ask this because everybody has his way. The Japanese have created something that works for them.
Yes.
The Chinese have found a way.
Yes.
The Koreans have blended things, the South Koreans.
Yes.
Now Vietnam, Thailand, a lot of these Asian tigers are rising quickly.
Yes.
Now, of course, we know that the Western world had a model that they use generally. All right, the Americans, the Germans, the British, the French. Is it possible to develop using their means, or we need to say, guys, we need to develop our own way?
There is no there's nothing new under the sun, or try to reinvent the wheel another. The miracles you see from East Asia actually borrowed from other parts of the world. They were not shy at all in borrowing from them. So you look at Japan. Japan, for instance, when they were building their railways, I think they brought in the Dutch. And in exchange for that, the Dutch had to train Japanese for them to build their own capacity. Lately, we've been discussing a lot about foreign aid. Japan was a major recipient of foreign aid, depending on how you review foreign aid has three main components. Subsidized loans, means low interest loans, grants, which is effectively free money, and then what we call technical assistance, where they bring in people to help you build it. You have emergency support and all that as a fourth category, but that's the three core elements of foreign aid. And the evidence shows that every single country that's developed today had a certain amount of foreign aid, including China. Japan borrowed the equivalent of about 10 billion US dollars after the end of the Second World War and invested them in very strategic industries, steel, highways, power plants, and that's what laid the basis for Japan's industrial development. And then in the same Japan, they developed, as a result of their success, they came up with something called the flying geese theory. Geese being the plural for goose, the difficulty of the English language. The flying geese theory. Now, the flying geese theory is that the lead geese, or the lead goose, the lead goose will lead up to a point and then peel off. And then another one steps in and then peel off another. So you see it happening like that over there. Japan did that, it peeled off. The Koreans stepped in. Now the
Chinese.
Exactly, the Chinese. And talking about Chinese, people don't know this, but Japan gave China foreign aid for 40 continuous years.
Japan gave China these so-called avowed rivals.
40. You can Google all that. They just ended that after China overtook Japan as the second largest economy. Wow. But they gave them foreign aid in the form of subsidized loans, grants, technical assistance, and so forth and so on. China, that's just Japan. Others, as recently as a few years ago, I think during the last Trump administration, China was even getting $2 billion from the World Bank. And Trump got so angry, he said, no, we cannot do that. But even before that, dating back, you see, what we call foreign aid now is, the technical name is Official Development Assistance, ODA. That means before that, there used to be another type of foreign aid. But that was mostly driven by missionaries, foundations, and charities. Again, that's where the Americans were pioneers. So as I speak with you now, we do believe that the most prestigious and highest ranked hospital in China was not built by the Chinese. It was built in 1921 by the Rockefeller Foundation as part of aid to China.
So we shouldn't shy away from this.
It's
about using it.
Exactly.
How to use it.
And you need to be very strategic as an aid recipient.
Okay.
Because sometimes those who give you aid also have their own motivations.
Oh, why not?
And so exactly why not? Because
there's not a problem there.
In 2015, we were negotiating with the IMF, and there were talks about the IMF capping how much we could borrow. I remember we went on a delegation with the president to a European country. I won't mention the name, and some of us had to hide in our hotel rooms because officials of that government were coming to our hotel, begging us to convince the finance minister to take in loans before the IMF things. And why? Because at the beginning of the year, they were giving targets. So if it's $2 billion, you get 10 countries, 200 each. And then all you have to go is to move from office, go to Ghana, look for someone. Listen, we'll give you 200 million, but 10 million is a grant.
So our job is to be strategic, to say, this money is coming. What can we do with it?
Yes.
So we can achieve our aim. And
First
also
of all,
possibly
you ask, how does it align with your development priorities?
Correct.
Because it may look attractive,
but
it may also distort your development priorities.
Correct.
And that's where so I've been reviewing our loan books, and the quality of the loans is so bad. Because they come in, as soon as they dangle a little money in front of them,
so we don't do a lot of thinking around.
We don't.
Which means it's even possible to get the donor to realign.
Precisely.
If you say that this can work, but you have to change this or that.
Sometimes they do. They do ask us for our priorities. And when that is done, they align. But there are other times where they also have already planned certain things.
Then you can say, well, we don't need your money then.
We have to be in a position. I do know that the South Africans do that. They actually are in a position to say, listen, we don't need this, we don't need that, because they have a highly efficient, besides the size of the economy, highly efficient tax administration system. I was telling my friends how the kind of Takashi, their tax people, they can actually go into your bank account and take money out if you owe them. And so they have a very high tax GDP rate, around 25%, one of the highest in the world. We are struggling to get to 15, and we can't even do that. So yes, there's nothing wrong inherently with aid per se, but you need to be able, because as I can't say, Onipa Yamwa. So we all at some point or the other need assistance. But the aid, and again, the name suggests that it's aid. It's not a substitute for your full effort. It's supposed to help you. And above that, if you look at China, South Korea, and Japan, what really triggered them beyond aid is international trade. For China in particular, the dramatic transformation is simply unbelievable. They started their reforms in 1978. they kind of struggled along and so forth and so until 2000, when American businesses convinced, I think, Bill Clinton to allow China to join the World Trade Organization. And then 2 years later, they took off. They haven't looked back since then.
And now they are the factory of the world.
They are the factory of the world.
Because they are more productive.
They are more productive.
Even a lot of American companies had to go there to
the Americans
set
are
up.
actually pushing for that. That, listen, Clinton, open the market for us. We want to go there. So they then invested a lot of foreign investment.
So there's a way in which, this is your productivity point, if we become more productive within the sub-region,
Yes.
anybody who wants to do anything can say, look, Ghanaians are hardworking,
Precisely.
they speak good
Precisely.
English, they are very honest,
Precisely.
and that we could actually manufacture more things
Yes.
here. The benefits will spin off, and then the others benefits. So there's a lot to be gained in this productivity conversation.
That's what it's called, productivity diffusion. It spreads to other things. And for fiscal, it didn't really come up during the discussions at the dialogue, but I wanted to link the benefits of productivity growth, aggressive productivity growth, to fiscal resilience, not just fiscal consolidation. I don't even like the term fiscal consolidation because it means nothing. Consolidation can be anything. But we need, in fact, you're talking about me writing for Daily Graphic. The very first article I wrote for Daily Graphic was 1996, December. Someone showed it to me when I came back to go, but I had forgotten about it.
Wow.
And it was called The Language of Economics.
Oh, Lord.
And how the language we choose influences how we think and how we act. So I would prefer fiscal resilience
than
to fiscal
consolidation.
You can consolidate anything negative or positive, but with resilience, you are
clear what
clear in
you're
your
trying to
mind what you're going to do. And productivity, once you do that, and therefore you reduce the cost of doing business, at the very minimum, you also increase profitability, which grows the tax base, which is different from the tax net. The tax net is the number of people who pay taxes.
The
So
base
you
is the
expand that.
potential number.
No, the base is what you actually tax.
Okay,
So
okay.
profits, incomes, consumption, these are the three main elements of the base. And if you grow the economy through productivity, then my brother Atul will have fewer sleepless nights, because as finance minister, he has all the burden of the country on his shoulders. So there's a close relationship between productivity and fiscal resilience and fiscal
We could talk all day.
sustainability.
Caleb, read some comments for my guests. I notice you're nodding vigorously because when we interviewed Nii Moi Thompson, we sort of we unclutter economics. Please get him some water as well. Forgive me. We don't. Maybe that's why I like talking to you, because I really don't like the language of economics. I think it's too exclusive. And as a journalist, I try hard.
Yes.
When I'm on the show and my colleagues ask me, so what does the budget say? I won't use words like fiscal rigidity. I hate those things.
And fiscal surplus and fiscal, who cares?
I always say that if you can't explain it to your 10-year-old, you don't understand it. So sometimes you need to think about it so carefully. You can reduce it to what it actually tries to say. Well, when a group of big boys meet, they can use those words. But when you are talking to the public, they don't want to hear that.
You know what? And this is where the journalism thing comes in. Because when I used to be an editor in Liberia way back. And one of our reporters brought a court story. And in there, he said, "Writ of mandamus."
The lawyers are also like that. Writ of mandamus.
And he put that in quotation marks. So I called him and I said,
"What is this?
What is this?" He said he didn't know. So I said, "You don't know. I don't know. And you want us to share this with them?" What the hell is that? The fact that you put it in quotes doesn't absolve. Yeah.
Because of that, a lot of my journalists are now going to law school because they want to understand mandamus.
So I asked him to call the lawyer for the lawyer to explain. And so the lawyer explained to him, and we put that in the story. So I said, "Now, don't you feel a little more enlightened? Now you are enlightened. I'm enlightened. We can also now tell the public that writ of mandamus." But that is the nature of some of the professions. We like to show off in our language.
No, but I think it's for me. It's not. I'm not emphasizing. If you don't even, and I don't want to use the word decolonize, but you see, the way language is a tool of oppression, and it's also a tool for enlightenment,
liberation also.
So, the language of a subject area can influence the way you think about the subject, and also make it very exclusive. So, for me, when I read anything, I try to say, look, if it's understanding we are trying to put across, let's simplify it so we can bring people along. Yes. Okay, but anyway, that's not the purpose of this interview.
Good morning, Bernard and team. I wholly agree with Dr. Nii Moi Thompson. cultural or behavioral change is the way to go. To achieve this, I believe our change should emanate from leadership and then the structure and content of our formal education. If we don't change our attitude and behavior to believe and have confidence in our own abilities to produce and consume our own, then we are going nowhere. The content of our education should also change our reading, writing, and reproducing same to creation, science, engineering, and how things are made. We will also not make any major progress if we don't. Lawyer Alex from Zooms. And that the Ghanaian worker is still a hunter-gatherer. We go to work only to win bread and to quench the various socioeconomic fires in the home. We lack the industrial work ethic. Good morning, Bernard. The truth is our curriculum isn't helping us as a country. Currently, my program of study has a course named Leadership, Corporate Ethics and Social Responsibility. So you see, we have master's graduates who can't even lead a department of government agency. We are 68 years after independence, yet our educational system isn't helping. Wish Mother Ghana better fit. Oh, Bernard.
Ghana, you are struggling.
I don't know.
Let me read some comments for you. I think you are struggling.
He's getting emotional.
No. Let me read a few more comments. This is from a professor. Good morning, Bernard. Discipline is linked to productivity. The question is, are we disciplined? This is from a professor listening to us. Here's somebody who is also listening from the planning side. Bernard, the restriction of statistics to only 10% is not progressive, and they should change that. The focus on IGF is too much. The professor is really doing great. I don't know what you're referring to.
Yeah, I'm not
Kofi, if you can explain.
Yeah.
Statistics to 10% and
I don't quite
focus on IGF. What?
Internally generated funds.
I don't know if he's talking about a specific institution. We need to develop a decentralized leadership where people come up with tailor-fit solutions for their respective communities, working in sync with national goals. Kojo Sego from Ponkatamanso. Good morning, team. Could you please pass this message to him? I'm interested in interning with the NDPC as the activities align with my career aspirations and would greatly enhance my personal growth. Well, there's a way of doing that, not through morning show listenership. Tell Iman that I'm listening to him.
Who's that? Someone who knows me.
he calls Ghana Kasongostan. This guy is Yao. You call Ghana Kasongostan?
Yeah, Bene.
Yes. Why is Ghana Kasongostan?
Because we do crazy things. He's probably referring to, I just noticed, I've been away for just a few years. I come back and everything is fake grass, which ticks me off. And I'm like, don't we think in this country? Now, fake grass, first of all, doesn't even absorb water.
Yeah.
And so it therefore enables flooding when it rains.
Yeah.
We have natural grass that God gave us. It absorbs water. And if we grow natural grass professionally, in the US it's called sodding, SODDING, because it's called sod.
Yeah.
And it's a multi-billion-dollar industry, growing green grass. They grow them in patches, and then they roll them like doormats, and then they spread them out. It's a multi-billion, and it goes with the construction industry. We can make, and then instead we've imported
I'll tell you something.
fake grass.
I have a theory.
Yeah, I hear you.
I haven't written on that theory, but I have a theory that the AstroTurf fake grass is emblematic of a bigger national problem.
Yes.
Shortcut, import everything from China.
Okay. This one is from Turkey, I'm told.
Wherever.
Well, maybe the Chinese have also joined.
Do it. But my feeling is that, growing grass is much tougher. And it takes much more determination. So even our footballers, we don't want them to play on normal. In fact, you don't even have mini parks. They just put this carpet on the floor, they play on it.
That's all job creation potential. That's all. And we can even export, because the Americans also export that to the Middle East, where they don't have. I mean, the potential in there of creating jobs. And I went to Parliament the other day, and on both sides of the entrance, they replaced the natural grass,
everything,
with fake. What is wrong?
It looks good.
Well,
that's what we do. We just want it to look nice.
No, I got out there and actually walked on it. It's a very nasty, because it's filled with sand and everything. It's like, oh, come on. So that's the Kasongo line thing. Yeah, I hear you, man.
Good morning, Bernard. I recall in business school those days when the issue of public sector reforms and work of NIRP came up. One of the reasons adduced for the failure or low impact, despite the loans and support, it emerged on the report was, quote, attitude was a factor that affected service delivery. Unquote. So we were then requiring more funding from the funders to tackle attitude. Obviously, the funders declined. insisting that we should solve that one ourselves.
Yes.
So this is
I
from
agree.
John.
I agree.
So nobody can give you money, change your attitude. As a question though, Bernard, on the matter of plantain from Caribbean, is South Africa accepting imports from other African countries? Because now I know they do not.
No, they do.
They do?
Yeah, they have immigrant communities there that import foods. So there's the whole immigrant communities there. And by the way, when they removed the visa requirements from for Ghana, can you guess the percentage increase in Ghanaians going to South Africa as a result of the abolition of the visa?
25.
25, try something higher.
30?
No,
40.
higher. No, higher.
50.
No.
60.
No.
70.
2,800%.
Sorry, you're saying when they removed the visa restriction,
Yes.
the number of Ghanaians
Arriving as quote unquote tourists,
oh wow.
2,800%. And a lot of them are young men and women briskly doing business. I know one in particular opening restaurants all over the place. And he's telling me, listen, it's easier to do this here than in Ghana. Ghana, I have to pay 5 years rent advance. Here, I pay only my deposit and first month's rent, and that's it. And it's opening. So they're actually moving capital from here there and setting up businesses. So that's another thing that we need to look at in terms of developing the SMEs. But the increase, 2,800% increase. Yes.
What realistically can this government achieve? My last question.
Oh, let me share the thing with you.
Yes. Your father's, is it a cheat or what is it called?
No, it's called People's Shop Purchase Card.
Okay.
19,
Bring Chief Mumin. So I just segue into him nicely.
1983, Agunas Rodro.
Yeah, after the break, yes, I know.
And the community is called Asisim. Asisim is where he lived, and I grew up there. I went to school there.
This is near Agona Swedru.
It's actually inside Agunas Rodro.
So he was giving, so to buy anything he needs this?
You needed a People's Shop, and these were sold in government shops only.
Wow.
Isaac, how are you? Isaac B. Thompson. I was actually named after him.
That's your father.
That's why Yao was calling me Ayman. Ayman is my guy name, so to speak.
So you're a Rasta man.
You see. And I like reggae too. So here's the thing. It's fascinating just how far we can walk by JK. And I was listening to, my daughter forces me to listen to rap. There's this line from this guy called J. Cole. J. Cole, yeah. He has a song called Love Yours. And in there, and I thought it applies so much to Ghana, in there he says, the good news is you've come a long way. The bad news is you went the wrong way.
Oh, no. So what are you going to do now? Oh, God.
So we have, and that's what, because I thought it applies so much, so accurately to Ghana, where we've made it. We've come a long way, 68 years.
Yeah.
No civil war, nothing. We are still what Nkrumah left for us. But we are celebrating 68 years with in the IMF doghouse. So this is what he had. On 7th September 1983, he was allowed to buy one bread. 13 Ghana cities. And don't forget, he had a family with my stepbrothers and stepmother.
So one loaf of bread.
One loaf of bread. On
13 cities.
Yes.
7th September 1983.
Yeah. And then he went back on the 22nd, 20th.
2 weeks later.
Yes. And he was sold one bread only. But that one had gone up to 15 cities by then. And then 28th, he
Another
went back.
week after.
Yes, he was sold one bread at 15 cities. Then at that point, somehow he was lucky because these things used to go in and out. So somehow he was lucky. He's now giving milk,
wow,
which is like a luxury.
So he got milk the week after.
So he got milk, 1 can of milk.
Oh Lord. 1
tin of milk, and then 5th. I don't know what explains the gap, but 5th. I suppose when there's nothing, you are pretty much on your own.
So 5th.
So 5th November 1983. One margarine, I think it's...
So the whole of October, I didn't get anything.
You're pretty much on your own. So 1 margarine tin rice, that's 10 cities. Then 1 quarter soap, key soap.
Still
that's
November.
16 cities. Still November, the same date. And then matches, 6 boxes.
So even matches... So to get these things, you needed
the card.
And he was a civil servant.
He was a civil servant. That means he actually was part of the
he was a
middle
big man.
class. Yes. And then matches, and then they charge you freight. Freight was 80 cities. So someone has to deliver. And then it goes on in November 8th or something. Yeah, 8th. So 3 days later, he gets milk, omo, sugar, and oil. And then bread. This is where we've come from. What Bajek indeed.
Wow. And we have a long way to go as well.
Yeah, we have a long way to go.
Look, I need to thank you, Doc. I could talk to you all day. He's actually the chair of NDPC. We've been discussing independence, economics, and everything else in between.